All right, welcome back to the Trampled Underfoot podcast show. Your hosts are Mark Lindsay and Eloy Escajedo, and it's 9:30 here on the East Coast, 6:30 over there on the West. How's everybody doing?
Yeah, we're just finer than frog hair over here, waiting for some cooler weather. We're still in the 90s, man. We need to cool off a little bit here. So,
We're still
uh,
in the swamp ass phase.
yeah, well, and you guys had a little bit of excitement last week, and sorry I kept bugging you, but I check up on my friends when stuff like that happens, and I didn't know how you guys were doing. I didn't know what was up. Um, But when Hurricane Ian drove through, I didn't know how you were going to fare because you're not that far away from where it hit. You're on the opposite side of the peninsula, but still, as the crow flies, that's not very far.
No, it's about 100
So,
miles away, or yeah, 100 miles away, roughly.
yeah. So I was concerned. So I don't apologize for bothering the crap out of you. Every so often, how you doing now? How you doing now? How you doing now? Almost like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
Well, yeah, no, it's funny because it was the evening of the show
Hmm.
when I and the day of and us doing the show last week
Hmm.
when it was the worst of it
Yeah.
for us here,
Hmm.
which wasn't much in this particular situation, but
Yeah.
um, during our show would have been the worst, which was just constant rain and the
Yeah.
flickering of lights a couple of times.
Yeah.
So we were spared here
Yeah. You were.
because you've seen the pictures and stuff, right?
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Yeah. And a few people lost their lives. I mean, wasn't it like either the first or the second largest loss of life due to hurricane in Florida? I don't remember
I'm not sure.
if
I'm
it
not
was
sure.
first or second, but it was up there. So, yeah, I was concerned. So
It was
forgive me. I mean, we were talking about it that night on the show too, about tornadoes and hurricanes scare the hell out of me. So when somebody I know is going through one, I'm like, yo,
there's a song, an old song, where it says um something to the effect it's more for tornadoes, but it's something to the effect of it blowed away. My whole family blowed away. The
yeah,
dog, the mortgage, the rent, the this, the that, and he goes throughout the story telling, and
hmm,
it blowed away, and this tornado come through our town, and it's like an old Woody Guthrie style
hmm,
thing that
yeah,
I heard on an album with by all I mean all names you wouldn't imagine, but my favorite Bruce Springsteen, and I'm not a Bruce Springsteen fan, but my favorite album of his was actually his country album where
hmm,
it's called, I forget the name now. I mean, I'm really digging now into my head, but since we touched on this, and it's all recorded in a barn, but the quality is so, they set it up like they used to do with Frank Sinatra where everything's live,
yeah,
and then you get the take, and they did it that way, and it sounds so crispy. The sound sounds so in your face, and he really imitates in his way all the songs like early Americana, and one of them is that. But I forget how the melody and lyric goes, but it blowed away my wife and my yard, something,
yeah,
they all went up in the tornado and stuff. Well, anyway, the risk is such
hmm,
when something like that happens, but again,
yeah.
I just it's one of those things. Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, as we said last time, you can run, but you can't hide. So, well, it it it's weird. I guess it's not connected, but for some odd reason, it reminds me. You asked me a few minutes ago, did I have anything for tonight? And something popped up in my suggestions earlier today that it's one of those things from so far out in left field, you wonder, is it even the same field? This guy in Wales digging in his backyard found a house. He found a house digging in his backyard. backyard, did a little bit of research and everything, and it turns out there was this old house there. Now he don't know exactly how old, but he posted this video of him digging around and finding some of the foundation walls for it, and started just digging deeper and kept going rock deeper and deeper. And so far, he's uncovered what looks like a either Edwardian or Victorian era um, uh, kitchen area with iron grates and iron doors covering the fire pit where you cook the fire, where you light the fire, and the cooking surface and everything else. And he's cutting out some big old huge shrubs. And he spent about 2 months digging this thing out. And he's got a lot more to go. So this is going to encompass about 3 different topics here. So bear with me for just a minute. So number one, you have the surprise of finding a house in your backyard. And this is in Wales again. I don't
Was
know if
it
I
in the?
mentioned that.
Did he dig down or against the
Well, it's
mountain?
kind
Or
of a hillside, a mound on his property.
okay,
And he just wanted to dig it out to flatten it. And there's a house. So he posted this video, and he had 4 other videos, but they're real short. I mean, we're talking about a squirrel, and there's a deer, and here's this. And then he posts this. And it just, boom, it took off. Evidently, it got shared on Reddit. I mean, when you think about it, guy digging in his backyard finds a house. Yeah, I want to click on that. I want to see.
mm-hmm.
He wasn't prepared for this. So he compressed about 2 months of digging into like a 6 or 7 minute video. And before I came in here into the studio, I looked at it again. He's got almost 300,000 views on this video. And he went from having like 4 subscribers, which were his friends and family, to over 5,000 just like that.
Nice.
So he posted and pinned it, the number one comment on the video, and said, look, thank you everybody for all the nice comments, and thanks for all the help with doing research and this, that, and the other. He says, but I'll be honest, I posted this video and I'm on vacation in Croatia. So I can't, sit here on my phone and answer all these questions. I'll do a video when I get back. So he's going to do a walkthrough and explain what he's found about it. I mean, he put a little bit of information in the description. He has found the house on a map from 1834 of the area, but that's as far as he knows. And he's got a bunch of other amateur archaeologists just volunteering in the comments section to say, oh, well, that door has got to be at least Victorian and probably older. And, that may have been an addition on an older property. So as far as he knows it's 200 to 300 years old, but he doesn't know even what he has yet. And he's out of the country right now and can't do anything, can't take any more video or anything like that.
That's interesting.
So you have the surprise of finding a house, number one. Then you have something exploding on you unexpectedly. And then all of the attention that's going to come along with that, both good and bad. And how sometimes posting the most innocent of things, you don't know what's going to take off and you don't know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
And he explained that in his description, in saying that he wasn't ready for this barrage of questions and offers for help or advice or anything like that. And he's not even in the country right now. And he explained, he says, people think that this is an ongoing work in progress. Well, it kind of is, but this is 2 months of video that I compressed in time lapses. So I haven't gone any further than what you see.
And what era does it? The 1800s?
Well, he says he found the house on a map of his property from 1834. But from the looks of the architecture, it could be anywhere from 200 to 300 plus years old.
Medieval
So
or
Victorian, 1800, mid 1800s, Victorian or earlier. So he doesn't know what he has yet. And again, like that one person said, that could have been an addition to a pre-existing place, but he doesn't know because he's still digging it out. I mean, he was digging out some big roots that had grown through walls and what have you,
yeah,
and digging out things that had been there for 20, 30, 40 years at least. So he doesn't know what he's got, but he's going to keep working at it. So
that's almost well, it's similar to, I guess you've heard of the, somewhere in Turkey, a
mhm.
guy was redoing, he wanted to either knock down a wall or do some electrical something or other, and he broke through the wall and there was a room,
Uh-huh.
and he went in the room and he looked around and he it was like a cavern, and he kept going, and there was another room, and then there was a hallway. And so anyways, that's how they discovered this ancient city
Hmm.
that back in antiquity, people of the era, wherever it might have been, somewhere in Anatolia, Turkey, somewhere,
Uh-huh.
and it's a system of caves with different rooms and that go throughout this whole mountain range that you can visit now. Like tourists go and visit, and they have like most of it dug out, so you can
Mhm.
go down with lighting and this and that. They have rooms for schools and all that, and they
Wow.
say that you've seen it, right? Those
No, I
maps.
haven't. I haven't.
They have a sideways map. It looks like a video game,
Hmm.
like Pitfall.
Yeah.
And so the people would do that. And so what they say is that they did that for during times of war.
Hmm.
The whole city could go down there, or a good amount, and lock them. So they had like these huge rock doors that they could slide and block, and they could have their cattle in there. Like it was that big.
Wow.
And they sell tickets, like people can go, and there's a few cities like that in that Anatolian um, slash Turkey region of the world. So yeah, so it sounds kind of like that, except in this case, it's in the 1800s, um,
Yeah.
and in Great Britain, but
So
still,
this place is in this. It was in this guy's house or in his yard or something.
yeah, they where they live is hill, mountain, this and
Hmm.
that, and he broke a wall
In his house or in his yard or
in his house.
okay.
And I mean, I don't know how that would have looked like, as far as I know what the mountain system or the cavern system, but he broke through and found a cavern or some other room.
Uh-huh.
And he went on a little bit, and then the authorities got involved, and now it's like a
Yeah.
whole, like, um visiting center, and this and
Wow.
that.
Because that opens up a weird question. And I used to sell, okay, I'm a recovering real estate agent. In a former life, I sold real estate.
That's a good real estate investment, isn't it?
Well, here's what I'm wondering. Who does that belong to?
It's national interest, probably. So it's probably
Yeah,
the,
I would, because, well, especially over there in that part of the world, most things like that are nationalized. But
yeah.
you have property rights a certain space above your home and a certain space down below your home, the dirt that your home sits on.
Mhm.
Um, but your rights only exist for a certain distance.
Yeah.
And that just makes me wonder. He knocked out a wall in his private home that linked to this. Did it go under other homes? Did it go under other properties or what have you? And so, who took ownership of it? Did the government buy these people out, or is he still welcoming folks in and guiding them in, through his living room, this parade of tourists going? You
Yeah,
know?
I don't know the details of that, but you can find the maps on if you
Mhm.
like type in any key combination of words, you'll find
Yeah.
um those sideway view maps,
Hmm.
and it's pretty interesting that
Yeah.
people which by the way uh that's sort of not, it's a fortification,
Uh-huh.
but um what we usually think of fortifications, well, I mean, generally is like the castle,
Yeah.
which originally, I mean, they would build in order to protect themselves from, I mean, if you had a stake in your area, you would build a protective something,
Mm.
fortification or wall. Crude it could have been early in the beginning, there's examples of it, and then as they went on, they became more fancy and fancy, and that's the equivalent of protecting your stuff.
Mhm.
um so like in all throughout Western Europe, you know, they have the
Yeah.
castles that we all know of, I mean, throughout all of Europe, but those were the equivalent of, I guess, I don't know that there's any underground stuff like what that I'm saying,
Uh-huh.
but fortification was important. You got to protect your stuff,
Yeah.
you know. You
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
feel
For
it's like,
sure.
what's this guy's name, the comedian, if you don't you have to have room for your stuff, you have to protect
Yeah.
it,
A
it's
place
all about
for stuff. Yeah.
protecting your stuff.
George Carlin, a place for my stuff. Yes, exactly.
I mean, that's the history of the world. How am I,
Well,
that's what
that's the
everybody,
meaning of life is of finding a place for your stuff.
yeah, I mean, everybody wanted to protect their stuff. In
Exactly.
medieval times, you can break
Mhm.
it down to, I got to protect my stuff.
Well,
So,
look, you can just look at food of various cultures and see that, you can, if you look at Koreans and kimchi, where that came from was burying it in pots in the backyard to keep so they could keep it. It was because you had all these marauding bandits and what have you, stealing chickens and stealing this. People buried their food as a way to hide it. And it just so happened that certain things went certain ways and they developed certain recipes that just haven't changed. But it
yeah,
was, that they buried it to hide it from people so it wouldn't get stolen.
yeah,
And, I mean, which brings about something else along those lines. And I saw this. It was one of those trips out of here and heading outside. Linda was watching this documentary series, and it was one of those on, I don't remember if it was on Discovery or Travel Channel or what have you, but it was one of those tales of things underground. Have you ever heard of? They called it Operation Tracer. This was during World War
no.
II and took place on Gibraltar.
Oh, well, I do know they had a system of caves that they blasted out, and for, yeah, I do know that, but
Right. Well,
that's as far as I go.
Operation Tracer, they blasted out a bunch of caves and everything and put a headquarters there. And it wasn't long after that they discovered that the Germans had a plan to basically invade Gibraltar and take it over. So they developed Operation Tracer. They built what they called the stay behind caves. And they kind of passed into history and became just a rumor until
Yeah,
1997 they were discovered. So from the end of World War II to 1997, they had kind of just passed into mythological status.
yeah,
But what they did was they made a couple of different rooms inside this cave complex, then sealed them up. And the plan was if the Germans came, they had already picked a crew of 6 people, 4 radio operators, excuse me, 3 radio operators, 2 doctors, and an officer in charge were going to be sealed into those 2 rooms, concreted in and the whole thing, with 7 years worth of food and provisions. And the whole thing was they were going to observe what was going on in the Mediterranean right there at the mouth of Gibraltar at the Strait and radio back to England. They had the crews picked. These guys volunteered. They went through a series of tests and everything else. Now, it never happened that they were locked away, but they were there, ready and raring to go. And they interviewed on this TV show, this documentary, the last surviving member of the crew that had been picked, and he was one of the physicians. And he explained a little bit about it and what was going on, but there was a lot he couldn't talk about because a lot of it is still classified. But the discovery of those two caves was kind of made public before anybody could put a lid on it. So it was too late and the operation was exposed. Otherwise, it would still be classified today. But imagine volunteering to be basically bricked into 2 rooms in a cave system. They knew for a minimum of a year, but they had enough provisions for 7 years just in case. Imagine that kind of an existence
Yeah,
and volunteering for it. Not none of
yeah,
me. I'm sorry.
yeah. I think people can tour it now. Like
Yeah.
they can have little, you know, walk along tours and all that.
Let's see here. It was, yeah, they discovered the chambers again in 1997. And yeah, that last surviving member died in 2010. But wow. I mean, it was something.
Yeah,
I don't.
from 1942.
Mhm.
When was the end? 47? 40
It ended in 45.
in 45. So 45 till now, it's been, gee, let me see. I can't do the math in my head.
Okay, well, let
20,
me see.
22 minus 1945,
77 years.
77 years. So we're running up on three-quarters of a century. No, we're
Mhm.
past three-quarters of a century
Right,
since World War II. My father was born in 42,
right.
so that's like that's pretty that's a long time. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it doesn't. Well, I wasn't alive during that time. I was born in 61, but I can remember stories from my grandparents and my parents talking about life during World War II. So it wasn't all that distant when I was born. So
No, it really, if you think about, um like for instance, when I was born in 75, like if you think of 1975,
mhm,
like in my case, well, from now, from then to now, there's, but if you think of 1975 and like a key moment, like for me, like when the Beatles and all the rock and roll, 1968, let's say,
yeah,
that was just 7 years from the time of my birth. So
yeah,
even though for me it was a long gone conclusion, the music, I learned about it as I grew up
mhm,
into the 80s.
mhm,
It was only 7 years past the time when I was born. So
yeah,
if you look at the big picture, I mean, just looking at it from my vantage point now,
yeah,
or from somebody in the future looking back, they would likely categorize us. I mean, you for sure because you're closer to it, but still, um, from me to you, they would look at it one block
mhm, yeah,
of, oh, all these people existed, like the how we delineate from 1960s something to 1970s, like it's all kind of in a block.
yeah,
Whereas I see the 60s and the 70s as a big change, which it
yeah. Well,
was,
it was a huge change culturally and
but for
socially and
but
everything.
for
Yeah.
people looking back in time,
Mhm.
um, from where we're at now, even then, or even further, they'll see it all and they'll say, oh, okay, so this whole segment here, like that's what I do when I'm looking at all this research. But in reality, a year's a year, even though it's just a year. 5 years is 5 years, but it's still 5 years, and a lot goes on
Yeah.
in that time period. But
Well,
when you're looking at these huge stretches of of decades or time,
oh,
you have to make sense of it, or what do you call it, shorthand it, um, in order for it to make some chronological sense in your mind. But there's a lot going on in those
oh
periods.
yeah. And it also depends on how on when you came into it as well, because I
Yeah,
was born 16 years after the end of World War II. So the war was still fresh in a lot of people's minds, because in the great grand scheme of things, 16 years isn't all that much.
not from this vantage point.
Right. And then 14 years later, you were born.
Hmm.
So it was still pretty fresh, but largely kind of being relegated to history by then, because I can remember at around that time when I was 14, 15, World War II is old history. That's ancient history, man. It might as well have been on dinosaurs, you know.
Hmm.
Forget about World War One, you know, because that's, I mean, were they fighting with bows and arrows or what? So,
There's this feature on which is open to all of us on Family Tree,
gosh. Mm,
which is the Mormon site, which
hmm.
you have a tree up on there as well. I know.
Yes, they do.
They have a section where you they'll give you categories. Like, let's say, look at what gas was when your father
Yeah.
was born. And have you seen that section?
Yes, I have. I've seen some pretty fun stuff.
Yeah, and you can pick your different relatives to see where. Well, it's funny because so I could do mine, and it'll tell you where gas was, and it'll tell you who was the I guess, like, Academy Award, and what was the best record at the time. Mine was Captain and Tennille. Love Will
Oh,
Keep
keep
Us
us
Together.
together. Really?
Yeah, that was the key, the popular song. And but and I could go to my dad's, and in my dad's was something to the effect of White Christmas, or something like
Yeah.
that, Bing Crosby, something like that. And when I get to my grandfather's, it's this old ragtime song from 1911, and I actually went back and listened to it. And it was world famous. I forget the name of the song now, but it was this famous ragtime song, and it's an instrumental until halfway through, and then they start singing, and it's really nice little melody and stuff in ragtime style.
Mhm.
And then I went back to my great grandfather, and it all stops. There's no gas. There's no gas prices. There's
Yeah.
no, because gas doesn't, it just simply wasn't a factor. There's no gas prices. I mean, gas was around now, because he was born in 1885. So at
Uh-huh.
that time, they already had invented certain things and discovered certain things, but it wasn't in popular, it wasn't in common usage
Yeah.
for the public. So there's no data for them to
Right.
add.
Well,
So
there.
from that point, I mean, in this case, from that point on, there was like nothing for my,
Right.
but there were things like, I think Taft was either, it was Taft for my great grandfather, as the president, and some sort of historical things, but that's it. Like, everything stops, that we consider normal things, like common things.
Yeah. Those kind of things are pretty fascinating when you stop and think about it, because in a lot of ways, a lot of time has passed, but in a lot of ways, we're still very close to that kind of thing. I mean, it is getting further and further every day, but well, like Richard French is talking about here, nightly coverage of the Vietnam War on national television from 64 until Saigon fell in, what was that, 75, 76, I believe. I remember that. I remember nightly coverage of that, you know. Um, and it did separate World War II from people's minds, but also the passage of time. And I don't know if it's the arrogance of youth where we, because I was a kid, where we think, oh, that's old, that's ancient history. What do I care about that? A bunch of people in World War II. What do I care about that? It was only by that time 20, 25 years gone. But when you're 10, 11, 12 years old, 25 years is ancient history because that's,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, I've only lived 10 years. The school year seems like it takes 10 years. So,
Um, now that JP's out there,
oh, okay.
I want to say this because I reflected on this a little bit. We all know that when you turn on the news, because you were just
Mhm.
mentioning the news, everything is, if you pay attention, it's like negative after negative after negative. Like everything, if you pay attention, is depressing as hell.
Mhm.
There's one catastrophe after the other. I mean, it's
Mhm.
gotten to the point that we're looking at possible nuclear fallout because
Mhm.
of the Ukraine scenario. I mean, if it's not that, it's a pandemic. If it's not that, food shortages. If it's not that, it's worldwide calamities. I mean, and if you were to look back, and I'm getting to the connection with JP, if you were to look back, all year long, 2 years back, three,
Mhm.
4, 5, 10, the news never gets better. It's
No.
never gotten. You may have one puppy story
Yeah.
because we can't be psychopathic. So we're
Mhm.
gonna throw in a puppy story or maybe a kitty,
Mhm.
a lost and found story. But for the majority of it, it's always tragic, and there's a psychological toll that whether one is paying attention or not, enough people that kind of weight put in the brain for extended periods of time, it's a psychological thing. And I'm not talking about me personally, although it definitely applies, but I'm talking about just humans in general being fed. If you go watch enough negative stuff, I mean, it's not like you're going to expect the opposite reaction coming from within people. Well, from my vantage point in the United States, that's what I've seen. But what was interesting here's where JP comes in. Well, in a roundabout, in a very direct way, but roundabout way, is that I ended up at some point this past week watching um, news from England,
Mhm.
like an extended amount of news from England,
Mhm.
and you know what I found?
Mhm.
The same direction of negativity, but with British accents. And so I thought to myself, so like everybody, I mean, is there a country on earth? I don't think so. I think that this is the norm where, and I don't know if it, I don't want to get conspiracy, but I don't know if it's by design or not, but I think humans kind of like, if everything's, I don't know a time when everything was being portrayed on the news. And you know what, folks? The weather outside is delightful. Ice cream for everyone, and the roads are clear so you can get to your destinations. And boy, this is just going to be another great one. We've had 5 great consecutive years in a row. No calamities. Go, go, go. No, it's always, and we're on the brink, the stock exchange, this and that, lightning,
Uh-huh.
thunder on the mountain. And it's like, obviously, we've all realized this to one degree or the other, but it's like, give me a freaking break, you know? So, anyways, that's the kind of, it's give me a break. It's like, my
The
goodness.
the number one rule of journalism. Rule 1. If it bleeds, it leads. It has to be sensationalized. I mean, and this is from the 30s. There's a quote from, I want to say it's William Randolph Hearst, but I may be wrong. Dog bites man is not a story. Man bites dog, that's a story.
Mhm.
Okay. It's got to be sensational. It's got to be bad because it has to be something to hold your interest. You don't want to hear about puppies. You don't want to hear about kittens. You probably have puppies or kittens of your own. And if not, you know somebody that does.
Well, wait a second. Wait a
So
second.
that's not really of interest. And there were channels for puppies and kitties.
No, no, I get that, but wait a second. Wait a second. How do we know if we haven't tried the opposite for a little while at least?
You're assuming we haven't. I mean, these people are experts. They are in, and they can tell because of sales and because of ratings and because of how much money the advertisers are willing to pay them. If you can generate interest and keep people buying the newspaper, tuning into your newscast, or now hitting your website or listening to your podcast, then the advertisers are going to pay big money to put their product or service on your network or your service or your streaming service. So they watch for trends, and it's easier now than it's ever been.
Is
I
that why
mean,
musicals? Is that why musicals fell out of favor then? Because musicals
well,
were generally heading in a happy direction because everybody's singing, but nobody wants musicals anymore. So
nobody wants musicals anymore, and that's a lot to do with that's a lot to do with just changing tastes and changing styles. But the movies always were a diversion to get you away from that stuff. And that's where the entertainment industry came from. It was a way to unhook, unplug, and get your head out of that and just look at Judy Garland singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, or Clark Gable saying, Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. You know, something, anything other than what was going on with Dillinger or Bonnie and Clyde, or how the banks were failing, or how, whatever was going on. It was a way to to unplug and get your head out of that stuff. It always has been. And musicals were fluff. Musicals, I mean, had a thin plot, but it was all about the extravaganza and the music to unplug and divert your mind. You know, take yourself out of the misery of the day.
so
Art.
so 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 I just want to say within this the context of what we're talking about. Obviously, you've heard of and we've all heard of the on the brink of a
Mhm.
nuclear catastrophe. Well,
Yeah.
recently, like with this Ukraine thing.
Mhm.
Well, it's been going for a while, but lately it's been ramping up because of the situation and stuff. We don't necessarily need to unpack that, but um, I was thinking to myself, which is an obvious thing to think, um, when you see these videos, these news flash videos,
Mhm.
it's saying, "In Russia, what's next?" And this and that, nuclear, this and that, nuclear, this and that, and I'm thinking to myself, let's say the worst case scenario happens. What in the world difference is it going to make? Like, you're warning me, and that's fine, but in the event of mass such and such, I don't know that it makes a difference. In other words, it's so beyond our, which we've touched on before. When you say, well, what does it matter to me? You've said before
Mhm.
when we're talking about certain things. So this does apply in the reasoning. You can know a thing, in this case
Mhm.
calamity, but it's like, whether you like it or not, it's gonna wipe everybody out if
Yeah.
that's the case. So what does it matter? So there's a little bit of that too, and it's like,
Well,
so
that's that age old question. If you could know the exact moment you were gonna die, would you want to? Would you
nah,
want to know it?
I don't.
Exactly.
Do you?
So basically, it's like, well, if we're on the brink of World War III with nuclear weapons, new and improved nuclear weapons, why are you telling us?
Yeah.
If not,
We're not
the
paid. We're not paid to worry about that kind of stuff.
well, the only reason I can think of is you're trying to create a situation. See, that's the other thing about journalists and journalism. They need a situation, they need a crisis. Never let a good crisis go to waste. And I will continue to throw out cliches because journalism is all about cliches. It's just the truth. They can't have people happy. There has to be something, there has to be a crisis. And if you look back over the years, when the big story of the year comes up, they get weirder and more far fetched when there isn't an issue. If there is an issue, like right now, Ukraine, that's an issue. They have something they can talk about. During the Vietnam era, it was the Vietnam War. That was something they could talk about. And believe me, they did for years. When it was the war on terror in the Middle East, that was the leading stories, and they had an issue. But in those years, in the late 80s and early 90s, when they didn't really have anything to talk about, what did we have? We had a bunch of shark attacks off Florida.
Hijackers.
We had a flesh-eating virus. Then Lyme disease was going to kill us all off. They had to have something every year,
Yeah.
some kind of crisis, to make, number one, make themselves relevant and keep themselves relevant, and keep you on edge so you would keep coming back to watch to see how things panned out.
Let me unpack this bit here. Um, well, two things. One, um, when we watch the news, when I watch the news, I
Mhm,
think that this is true for everybody out here, but you guys tell me, and you tell me, Mark.
mhm,
And you hear about these politicians wherever you may be around the world, in line with what you were saying, what we were saying. No matter what year or what decade going back, as I stated before, I'm restating now in a different way. These politicians, well versed and well studied, never get it together. And when you're watching, like, it's always on the cliff of imminent,
mhm,
catastrophe. They never seem to. And so when one watches and you come to this realization, at least it's a thought. It's
mhm,
like, why don't they do X, Y, and Z, and and like give some slack to people, but they never do. They always go the route of worse and worse, or apparent worse and worse. Um, and you're always second get backseat chauffeuring people's decisions in positions of power and such, and they never get it right. And you're like, well, um, what's the story here? They suck really bad at what they do, and yet they're so it's like another layer of that we're talking about, negativity cells and whatnot, because
and-
you're thinking to yourself, boy, if you don't have the money, don't spend it, or something like that, like, if I
well,
don't have the money to buy three pieces of candy, I'll settle for one if I can, but if I don't have the money, you know as an example. but
then I
these
go
people
without. Yeah.
but these people know, these people are like, ramming the truck down the highway.
And 100% on purpose. You and I have discussed this off camera many, many, many times.
Yeah, we have. But
And
it's just
and
the
now you
psychology.
know what, and now you know why I have unplugged from all of that. I don't follow the news.
Oh no, I don't.
I cannot tell you the last time I watched a newscast because I don't remember.
Let me lay this out for you. By the way, I don't. Okay, so we have talked about this a lot,
Mhm,
and I don't. when when I've confronted you, or tried to shine a light in what I'm seeing, I'm not suggesting that you don't see it and your decisions is, um so here's so I'm aware that you're making a conscious choice, is what I'm getting at. Like,
Yeah.
I've never been unaware of that.
Right. Understood.
But regardless, we fall into patterns.
Mhm.
Because I mean, what do you do when you discuss things? And
Sure.
when you unpack a set of ideas, um, there's always other ideas that you're putting to the side in order to follow
Right.
down one rabbit hole, in your thinking and stuff,
Sure.
at the exclusion of other possibilities in order to get anywhere.
Right.
But that's where I wanted to go. um I've wanted to make a video of this, and I don't know how like, I've played with it in my mind. So the problem with human, and I don't even know what to title it, but I'm going to share it publicly because screw it. I mean, whoever whoever's interested in that, by all means. I don't know that, you know um human communication, which we have touched upon.
Hmm.
um I'll lay out what I'm thinking as for a video, and I think it's pertinent to this. So you and I are two individuals,
Hmm.
and in Mark Lindsay's, and Mark can be anybody, I could be, but we'll use Mark Lindsay as an example. Mark Lindsay is a human being, and this human being has a mind, and the mind thinks, and there's things that unfold in his thinking, and he has categories that he plays with,
Hmm.
and within those categories there's subcategories, and
Hmm.
he has this whole world going on in his mind. But you got to multiply that by all the minds on earth,
Sure.
7 billion plus,
Hmm.
and each mind is independent of the other, with crossovers in certain
Hmm.
things. But a topic like war,
Hmm.
or something as simple or not as abrasive, like, let's say, music, although it could
Hmm.
be abrasive too depending on your taste.
Sure.
Any topic that two people begin to engage in, um even though they're using, let's say in the case of us, the same language in
Hmm.
order to express our thoughts in one topic, we're coming at it with some key points that we share in common, due to history, due to,
Hmm.
whatever our personal database of knowledge that we've experienced. But the problem is that within that, words, although they have the same definition in a dictionary,
Yeah.
may have more import for you or for me depending on the word within the sentence. And we
Right.
build words into sentences, into paragraphs, and so on. And because of all these variations in your mind and in my mind, even though there's crossovers and this and that, and the fact that when we speak, it's one word at a time unfolding
Right.
at the exclusion of so many other words, the room for miscommunication.
Hmm.
But by the way, considering mood, because humans, not only is it that we're a mind, but the mind also has moods. There's also
Emotion. There's all kinds of things.
there's all kinds of things. So because of that, human beings, there there is no peace. There is no resolution. There are moments of resolution. There are agreements that are arrived at, and there's always the push again.
Gosh.
It's like a con- it's like an ongoing conversation. Humanity, people, relationships. It's an continuously, to be continued scenario.
Right.
I think it's an obvious thing to think, and I took the long road to get there. You could just say, well, it's obvious that we all never really ultimately get along, with one single idea and settle it for good. But
But
there's a process that occurs in
right.
order to arrive at that idea, and I'm trying to chop it up. And I think that that's a good, the reason, final thing I'll say, the reason I'm saying this is there's so many incons missed miscommunications on every topic, on
Hmm.
everything, and there's no solution to it because of people's,
Well,
we're all a universe unto ourselves. Even though we're similar, we're all a universe unto ourselves. So it's a complicated, humans are complicated.
well, I believe that there is a solution, and that is discourse like we're doing right now. Like as you say, we're two different people, two different ends of the same continent. We're speaking a common language, but we're from different age groups. We're from different cultures. We're from different backgrounds. We're as different as you can get, but still have enough commonality to be friends. You know what I mean? So it's discourse between people like you and me that can settle things. Things
Unlimited,
can be yes, limited things. Obviously,
and for and for
we
and
can't
for a
settle
short
anything
time,
above us.
and for a short time, for a spell.
Well, for us, like we can't settle anything above our pay grade, but we can ding dong sure settle the common things between you and I. I can settle things between my neighbor and I. If his dog is barking too loud at 3 in the
Yeah,
morning, I can
yeah.
talk with him,
That's as
and
good as
say,
we
hey,
can
look,
get. That's as good as
and
we can get.
right. But that is a solution. But and my point in all this is we can do this if we're left alone to do it.
Yeah,
And if we really want to do it.
yeah.
It's
That
just
is,
as easy for me to go over and talk to my neighbor as it is for the guy on the other side of him to call the cops and bitch about the dog barking. You know, I
yeah,
personally would rather go talk to him and say, hey, can you bring him in the house at night so he's not out here barking at the cats that are walking along the fence at 3 in the morning? Oh, yeah, I can do that. Okay, thanks. That's better than having the sheriff knock at the door and say, you better do something about your dog or we're going to take him away from you. See, that I think that that's a solution if we are left alone to do it. And that's
yeah,
one of the reasons, another one of the reasons why I unplugged from all that stuff. Now, when I say I don't watch the news, that doesn't mean I'm not informed. There are websites I go to, but I also don't believe any one source. If one source says it's raining, I'm going to go check another two sources and see what they have to say.
yeah,
You know, I don't really care about the sports scores because I don't follow sports. When I want to know the weather, I go to the National Weather Service, the NOAA website, and I look at it and say, okay, well, they're forecasting this, this, and this for this week. Okay, great. I can kind of plan ahead. I
yeah,
don't need to spend 15 minutes looking at lotion or shampoo ads waiting for the guy to tell me if it's going to rain tomorrow. you know so I've unplugged from them. They're not telling me what to think about the stories. There was a fire down the street. I can go to a couple of websites and see, okay, it was here, it was there, they think it was caused by this, but the investigation is ongoing. I don't need to look at the hairspray commercial and wait for them to get to that story. Meanwhile, tell me that the sky is falling in 15 different places at the same time. You
yeah,
know, I stay informed in my own way without their hysteria and without their bias. So that's what I mean by being left alone. They can't have you and me getting along. There has to be a difference. There has to be a crisis. There has to be a problem. Because without that crisis and without those problems, they don't have a job. They don't have a reason to exist. They lose control, they lose power, they lose their reason for being.
yeah,
So they have to keep you and me close to having a fist fight with one another so they can keep going to the bank and stay relevant. That's why I choose not to partake. I choose not to participate. No thanks.
yeah. On the other hand, so I agree with that. So the ones, or the more, the how could I say it? The better, the more practical way
Mm-hmm.
is this individual coming to agreement
Mm-hmm.
on whatever it might be between individuals. Um, when but the more individuals you come across,
Mm-hmm.
um, the more difficult it becomes, because people play by different rules
Right.
due to the categorizations that they use, or moods or attitudes
Hmm.
or personality differences. They could be psychopathic, they could be
Hmm.
narcissistic,
Sure.
um, wrong understanding about something could lead to a different. So the more
It sure can.
people you involve in your surroundings, or you have to interact with, the more variable for miscommunication and so on. So it is chaotic. And anyways, so I agree that the personal,
Hmm.
person to person, is the best we could hope for, reaching understandings and so on. But I think that, so my point in the beginning was that humanity is an impossible thing.
Hmm.
The solution would, or is, that you're saying, because it's the only thing we can do,
Yeah.
interact with an individual. um but in as far as conclusions that one comes to,
Hmm.
um some other person reaches another conclusion, and that sort of thing on the
Hmm.
same topic. And even two people that arrive at the same conclusion get there in different fashion,
Yep.
and and or one earlier than the other. um One might take years, another one not. There's potential of reaching a certain conclusion, but that person hasn't arrived at it yet because their personal journey hasn't taken them in that direction yet. Maybe
Right.
today I'm here believing one thing, and then tomorrow I'm somewhere
And
else because I've acquired an understanding or some sort of enlightenment, or vice versa. More regression. And so humans are so complicated that
right.
that yeah. So that's the idea of the categorization boxes that I wanted to play with and stuff. I think
Yeah.
that there's I think that a lot of people, I run it because I watch a lot of stuff out there.
Hmm.
We all do, and I notice that people, we all do it because we all fall victim to the same things, because after all, we're all
We're
humans.
fallible. Yeah.
I mean, we all have the same ability to error and the same ability to
Right.
reason. Well, generally speaking,
Generally speaking, overwhelmingly, yes. And I'm not even talking about coming to agreement over things, because that neighbor can just as easily tell me to pound sand. But if we can, even if we disagree completely, that's okay. We can, if we can acknowledge and accept the fact that we just don't agree on this, and that's it. It doesn't automatically make us enemies. That's my point. You know, if you think that that vanilla ice cream is the greatest flavor in the world, and I disagree and say no, it's chocolate, that doesn't mean we're enemies. It just means we're different, and that's what makes humans. That's what makes the world go round, is the differences. We all don't have to be the same. And I think trying to make each other the same, or trying to make everything, we're never going to be 100% in lockstep agreement with one another. All I'm saying is that's okay. We don't need to be. All we have to be able to do is accept the fact that everybody has their own ideas about every subject under the sun. You can listen to a Beatles tune you like, and I can listen to the same Beatles tune and like it just as much as you do, but we're going to have different reasons. More than likely, you may be more enthralled with the vocalist and the melody, and meanwhile back at the ranch I'm more enthralled with the bass line or the percussion elements, or even just the production value of it. You may love the guitar tone, and I may love the tone of Ringo's snare for some reason. It doesn't alter the fact that we both love the song. We just have different reasons for liking the same thing.
yeah, we
we
have different
we're
focal points
we're
on why we like the certain song,
exactly,
or
you know.
we both have certain interpretations of of what is important, and we bring that to the table. But here's the
Ex-
thing: your understanding that you just laid
Mhm.
out, um, I would place it under the category of the live and let live.
Mhm. I am
Um,
that kind of a guy. Yeah.
with so the live and let live applies to a lot of people in
Mhm.
many. The live and let live category applies to everybody to a certain extent. Be it when you go to a store and you pay for your, yeah, there's many scenarios. Some people take it to more extent, and other
Mhm.
people will deny the live and let live in certain situations.
Mhm.
In society, we have seen people, and I'm talking about America now, although you could see it across, that they don't believe in the live and let live.
Right.
So with those people, you can reason with them on certain things,
Mhm.
but places where that they've drawn the line, you can't reason with them, as we've seen in the past.
Oh yeah.
So we do live in a world like that, and so the only solution with that is to avoid those type of people,
Yeah.
um, for various reasons. But the live and let live idea is, I think it's the opposite of a sort of controlling idea. There are people out there that are are controlling and want
Mhm.
to control other
Mhm.
people.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't have the ability to. Maybe it's just hardwired into them. They don't have the ability to accept autonomy from other people, and that's a big problem. And so there's misunderstanding and whatnot, but there's people that
Sure.
are totally opposite of what you've just expressed.
Well, and Jim makes a good point here. That live and let live goes right out the window at Walmart opening for Black Friday. Yeah, it's dog eat dog then. And I live and let live is kind of sort of my outlook on most things, but that doesn't mean that I don't have firmly held beliefs. And there are some things that I'm not that I just I have certain thoughts and certain beliefs that I hold on to firmly. And there is no give and take on that. There are certain things that I believe that are just, that's it. And it's not negotiable. But if it's not affecting somebody else, I don't believe it's any of their business. And it's not even relevant to discuss. Like spirituality. Spirituality is between me and my creator, and that's it. It's nobody else's business. And I've always believed that. Um, so it's to me, it's just my spirituality is not open for discussion, and that's just it. So, and that's the most religious I have spoken, I think, ever in public.
How about your freedom of movement in society
Oh
from
yeah,
one
that's
location?
another example.
You
Yeah.
don't want to be impeded. You don't want your forward motion in whatever direction that you decide to
Well,
take in a course of a day to be halted by someone that simply wants you to stop because they feel like it.
right, understood. There are limits. We all have limits. There are certain areas we can't go into. You can't just go walking into a maternity ward in the hospital. There's got to be a reason for you to be there. And we all understand there's limits and they're socially acceptable. Not that you'd want to, but you can't just go walk into prison and sit down in a cell. You can do something that'll end up with you in that cell, but you can't just go in there. But you're right. If I want to go to this grocery store, I want to go to the grocery store, get what I want to get, and get back, and not have to answer to anybody as to why, how long, how much I'm going to spend, how many bags I'm going to use, and do I need this big cart or do I need a hand basket? It's none of your business. And that is live and let live. Just you do you. you're buying 2 Twinkies and a Mountain Dew and you're pushing around a shopping cart, knock yourself out. It's none of my business. I just don't care. Just
Yeah.
get out of the way so I can get my Twinkies and Mountain Dew, and
Yeah,
we'll get along.
most people agree with that. Although there are people
Yeah.
that don't agree with that, even in that benign, what we would consider benign. For
Oh yeah.
instance, in New York a couple of years ago, the local government there decided that, I think it was just in New York City, they decided that the big gulp,
Yeah.
after studying the fact there was too much sugar, and so they said you can't buy. It was banned because in their eyes they had studied it, and with good reason had come to the conclusion that it was not good for the average person, and so they banned it, and it was a big to do. Now, I said with good reason. They studied it. There was a scientific truth
Hmm.
to it. Coca-Cola tomorrow being completely banned is a good idea if you're considering from a place of you want to organize your society for a healthier society. But what you're doing, the compromising that is, um, the freedom of people to go ahead and do what the hell they want,
And
regardless of whether it's a good decision or not, as long as that they're doing it to themselves and so on. And then the argument is, yes, but you're weighing on society by doing wrong decisions. And then the question is, how far are you willing to go in order to make um, people make the best decisions? How much of their individual autonomy to make errors are you
well,
willing to, and you don't know what the consequences of that will be. Your vision of what's best for other people, you don't know what the consequences of that will be. Yeah.
you got to do is look at the result. Do you know what happened as a result of that ban?
I don't know what happened.
People just bought 2 larges instead of the big gulp.
Yeah.
That was the result. That's all it did. It just made people have a soda in each hand instead of one.
Yeah, people
You
people
know, if you want to drink 64 ounces of Pepsi or Coke,
you will drink it.
you will drink it, and there's nothing that anybody's going to do that will stop you except ban the sale of Pepsi and Coke. I mean, you see that all over the place. Okay, we're being way more political than I wanted to be, and way more. But anyway, it's a good, excellent point to me anyway. They wanted to ban these plastic shopping bags here in the state of Oregon because it's all ending up in the ocean and it's killing off the sea turtles because they get a bag wrapped around their neck and then it chokes them, they drown, they die. I don't know what all.
Yeah.
They went through this big old long to do. So, what they did was they got rid of the low density polyethylene single use shopping bag and they call it a for life bag. It's a thick, heavy duty, high density polyethylene bag that you pay a nickel for. Their thinking was you will save these bags and take it back to the store and keep reusing them. And the nickel they're going to charge you is to deter you from just keep using these bags. The result was that's exactly what happened is people are not taking their, and I know because we take our bags back and we reuse them, and I watch people. There have been, I can count on one hand the number of times since June that somebody else brought in their own bags and put them on the little rack and then loaded their groceries. Everybody I have seen, with a few exceptions, just pays the nickel for the bag. So now They didn't deter people from
They
using
added a
these
tax.
plastic bags. They just now charge you a nickel for a bag that's even stronger, that is going to photodegrade, takes even longer to photodegrade.
Yeah.
So you didn't fix a situation. You just now made it worse because people are still taking those bags for single use. They're still ending up in the ocean. And now they're even stronger than the bags the bags that you banned. People don't care about a nickel. They'll use 10 bags and pay 50 cents. They don't give a stink. But it's, you can't really anticipate all of the consequences. But after so long of human evolution, you can start to anticipate the results by looking at history. They banned the big gulp, people just buy two large sodas. They ban the single use bag and charge people a nickel. They'll just keep doing it anyway and happily pay the nickel.
Well, then the question comes to something like, which we don't have to go further down, but just as an aside, then we have to go to the at what point, what is the line? Well, I think I have the answer to that. So here's my thought. Everything you just said with the sodas and everything else, but change that up for liquor back in the 1930s,
Mm-hmm.
was it?
The 20s, yeah, the Volstead Act, yeah, prohibition.
And so people said, "Oh, so now we can't." Well, yes, we can, and a whole illicit market opened
Mm-hmm.
up,
Yeah,
and the government, well, it hired agents, and the whole
mm-hmm.
story unfolded, and crime and so on, and people went to Cuba, places like Cuba,
Sure.
in order to have their jollies, and drink it up,
Or Canada.
and you can't you so even and money went out the door,
Mm-hmm.
and so it became untenable. um Even though people thought it was a good idea, there a few people
Mm-hmm.
put that on the backs of every American. um I would say, although there has to be some limit somewhere, I'm not capable of saying what that limit is, because it depends on you. um
Mm-hmm.
it depends on the other person, as long as they don't cross the line into my
Mm-hmm.
my rights or whatever.
Yeah.
So in the case of, like, other things, like whatever it might be, um there has to, in my mind, there's some sort of decent level, but whatever decent level in my mind is in my mind and for
Right.
mine,
Mm-hmm.
not for the next person. So that's why it's a difficult thing. Where's the line? How could
Well,
it be, like hard drugs that are now illegal used to be completely legal back in the day?
I
Um,
think the line is just mind your own business. If it's not affecting you, mind your own business. But we can't do that. I mean, we're talking about where's the line. There was, oh man, it's been a few years back now. There was a website you could go to, and I don't even remember what it was called. But basically, what it was a bunch of busybodies running around taking a picture in the back through the back window of SUVs to show how much wasted space there was back there. And you don't need an SUV because you're not using it. You're not using that cargo area for anything. You can buy a smaller car. And it's just busybodies basically looking through windows. You're not using that. You don't need that SUV. Well, number one, who the hell are you to decide for anybody else what they do or do not need?
yeah,
Second of all, mind your own damn business. You obviously don't have a job and have too much time on your hands, or you wouldn't be running around with a camera worrying about what I'm driving. So just mind your own damn business. If I want a big gulp, I'll buy a big gulp. Mind your own damn business. It doesn't affect you. Don't worry about it. I'm the
Yeah.
one that's going to be running to the bathroom 15 times, not you.
Well, do you remember when um, the Hummers became all the rage?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I I remember. I don't know about you,
Mm-hmm.
but I remember seeing those through the streets of Miami and thinking to myself,
Mm-hmm.
"That is stupid." Even though they're cool,
Mm-hmm.
but
That's not my style.
it's not. It's so not. What one would think is
Well, it's a military vehicle. It wasn't never designed for civilian use.
down like streets, little streets and stuff.
Yeah, well,
And
they had to downgrade a whole bunch of stuff off of it that was military spec to put it on the road. I mean, there's the Hummer that the H1 I'm talking about, the big one that looks like the military grade, is not the same vehicle that the military drove.
well, so I saw that
Hmm.
and I thought to myself, that is the most stupid, ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Although
Hmm.
it was a curiosity and you'd see it.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: that's as far as I took it. If some
Hmm.
person wanted to, felt good
Yeah.
driving down the road that and paid the gasoline to get from A to B every day, and that was their
Right.
thing, that's their problem.
Exactly. You have the right to drive the biggest gas guzzler that you can afford to drive, but you also have the responsibility of paying for all of that gas
Yeah,
and the insurance and the car payment. It's nobody else's responsibility but yours.
yeah. So it's like, but there are people that are on about what they're on about. But anyways, long story short, I think that covers. We've covered a nice
Yeah.
little series of things.
I want to talk to a couple of things here in
Okay.
the comments. Jamie was talking about them bags are about $1.50 in the UK. Now you see that is a deterrent. 5 cents is not a deterrent. Okay. If they priced each one of these Walmart bags at $1.50 each, everybody would be bringing their bags back in and reusing them. Believe me. But a nickel, you know, they puffed up their chests last year and they raised the deposit on aluminum cans and uh, plastic bottles for sodas. The deposit is now 10 cents because it used to be a nickel. Well, people will throw their litter all over the place. I don't care about a nickel. Most folks won't even bend over to pick up a nickel anymore. So we're going to raise it to a dime to incentivize people to return them. They're still throwing them out the windows. All that did was help subsidize the homeless guys who walk down the street picking up bottles and cans. Now they have to walk half as far to get the same amount of money.
Yeah.
If you make it $1, people will start returning their bottles and cans. They got to have some skin in the game, and a nickel just isn't enough skin. But if they were $1.50, Jamie, you can bet everybody would be bringing them. You
Some
know,
people get outraged
good.
and they well, there's always, so this goes back to so there's always, there's no solution in terms of, you're always going to get pushback no matter what the
Yes,
story is.
true.
And so you're always going to have a segment of society rebelling against the other segment
Right.
of society under the category of whatever that issue might be.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And Jim Dockrell has a point here. I'm old enough to remember when plastic bags were going to save all the trees. That was, yes, I remember that as well. That was going to be, we got to save the rainforest. Never mind the fact that paper sacks were made out of mostly recycled newspaper at the time. But they also weren't cutting down the rainforest to make bags. This is a specific type of cottonwood tree that is raised on private property on plantations. I know because we got a ton of them not too far to the northwest of us. So Yeah, it wasn't just they weren't going out and cutting down old growth forests to make plastic paper sacks. It was a lot of it was recycled, and a lot of it was pulp that they couldn't use in the timber mills. So, but yeah, but bring that back. There are a couple of grocery stores around here that don't play the 5 cent game. They don't offer plastic bags at all. They offer the old fashioned paper sack. And that's a perfectly viable option. And it's a great option because they don't have to charge for the bag.
Florida is so different than where you're at. We practically have um, a smokestack in back of everybody's
Mm-hmm.
backyards. We need to crank up the the production of.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different environment here.
Yeah.
Um,
And, they also make good points. It was Jamie and Jim over here talking about what do you think about paper straws?
I don't like them.
Have you tried a McDonald's milkshake through a paper straw yet?
No, I
Well,
don't do
you
the.
haven't lived. You haven't lived until you've tried a McDonald's milkshake through a paper straw. It's good for about 3 sucks, and that's it. Then you go get a spoon.
Hey, three. I'm gonna three
Yeah,
sucks. Three sucks are better odds than Las Vegas. I'll tell you what.
that's true. But Jim Docker also brings around a good point. But they put those paper straws in a plastic wrapper for hygiene. Ain't it funny? Did you notice that? I'm glad
Yeah,
you noticed that, Jim. The paper straw is in a plastic wrapper, but the plastic straws were in a paper wrapper.
they can
Hmm.
never quite get it right, can they?
Yeah, I mean, we missed it by that much.
Well, the lids are plastic too.
Yeah.
So, in truth, if you wanted to go all paper, it would be a whole paper thing, and they'd have
Mhm.
to wax it. It'd have to be that wax paper to protect,
Yeah.
so that it wouldn't penetrate or whatnot.
Yeah. Well,
They could do that.
they could. They very well could. I mean, look, I sound like I'm just some guy who wants to dirty up the world, and I'm not. If you want to brand me something, brand me a conservationist. I believe firmly you shouldn't pee in the pool, but that doesn't mean you can't get in the water. You don't have to take a hands-off approach on this stuff. And if there's a better way, if paper sacks versus plastic. I'll use paper. I mean, we did it for, gosh, when did Jim help me out on this? When did plastic bags become the norm? It hasn't been that long, you know?
People have been peeing in the ocean for centuries.
Yeah, well, fish have been doing it for millions of years. What are you going to do?
Have you ever been in like there's a bunch of people and you're swimming here in Florida and stuff? I remember a couple of times, and the water's a certain temperature, and you get around certain people and you're swimming and you feel a warmth coming. You know exactly what it is. It's a water cloud
It's a
of
warm
urine.
current.
You're like, oh no, and everybody's no.
It's a sudden warm current from the Gulf Stream, I guess you'd say
Yeah,
it. Let's see. Northern Ontario has hundreds of thousands of acres of planted softwood trees just for the paper industry. Yeah, up here they plant a certain type of it's it's a cottonwood slash poplar tree that they let grow to about maybe the same diameter as a grapefruit, but they grow real tall and they're real straight trunk, and they pack them so tightly together that a rabbit couldn't get through. And I mean, because they are touching at the base of these trees, and they go through and they clear cut the whole thing, rip out those stumps, and replant. And then in 5 years, they go back and do the same thing. So they have a rotating 5 year cycle that, and these are plantation trees that are grown for paper. And that's how they get that bright white printer paper, because they have to use less bleach. Well, they don't actually use bleach, they use peroxide, but to bleach it white. But if they start with a real bright white wood, they have to use a lot less of it. So yeah, it's so you're not saving a tree by using plastic bags. What you're doing is you're putting a tree planter out of business.
Yeah.
So
All right.
Jim said, thank you, Jim. It was about 1979 from paper to plastic in grocery stores. So, yeah, somewhere roughly in there. So,
I
yeah.
mean, paper, plastic. I mean, it's like you got to take your groceries home somehow.
Give me one of each. I'm bisexual. And on that happy note,
We'll end it there. All right. Well, we had a good time, folks. We go live every Tuesday, 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific, here on the Trampled Underfoot podcast channel on YouTube. And we also have a website, trampledunderfootpodcast.com, where you can catch our past episodes by pressing that Wayback Machine button. You can catch those and download them to your podcatcher. And we also have a site over on Facebook, and you can drop us a message if you have any show ideas over there. We've had lots of people drop us show ideas. That's why we mention it every week. I mean, we're flooded with them, but if you act now, you might get yours in early, and we might discuss it live here.
yeah.
With that said, we're also sponsored by
Harneo Media, your web solution. Hey, look, if you're just you and me talking here, I mean, come on, I'm going to lean over the fence here, and hopefully Steve will post a link to harneomedia.com. Because if you're looking to create a web presence or improve your web presence, and let's be honest, we're talking a serious improvement in your web presence here. Get a hold of Steve over at harneomedia.com. He just posted the link over there in the chat. He can do as much or as little as you want him to do. If you know how to run a website, just looking for a web host, he's your guy. If you have absolutely no idea what you're doing with a website, like me, he's your guy. It's personalized service. And when you deal with Harneo Media, you deal with Steve. And that's all there is to it. It's not some nameless, faceless person in a call center somewhere. It's Steve. He's a friend of ours. I hope he's a friend of yours. We believe in supporting the people that support us. And that is Steve Nealon over at Harneo Media. Check him out, HARNEAL media.com. Sponsor of Trampled Underfoot podcast.com. And I posted a link to that finding a 200-year-old house in my garden video over on the Trampled Underfoot podcast Facebook page. Go into the search bar up there in Facebook, type in Trampled Underfoot podcast, hit enter. The first link, that's us. And it's right underneath our appeal for show ideas. It's the very first link. It's a very cool video. Check it out over at Trampled Underfoot Podcast on Facebook.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I'll check it out for sure. I'm interested in knowing what the story is with that guy from Wales. Um, Nothing, folks. Enjoy yourselves. Have a safe week. Be safe. And we'll catch you next week.
Peace.
See ya.